And we start. Are we live on YouTube and LinkedIn already? Can you hear me, Harita? Should we start?
You can start it.
Okay. All right. So how do you stay ahead in a world where cyber threats evolve faster than we can count and new security tools pop up every day? Welcome to today's Tech Social, where we'll explore how cybersecurity research is being reimagined for the AI era. I'm Gabby, a business analyst here at Cogent. We have Ajay here with us, who is our director on cybersecurity and will be our moderator today. And the speaker today is Richard Stiennon. Is a renowned cybersecurity analyst and author with decades of experience tracking the industry. Richard will have a chance to introduce himself in a bit. In the meantime, if you have any question, if you have anything to say, you can leave your comment on the chat, or you can also raise your hand. We'll take your questions. Thanks again for being here. Ajay, over to you.
Thank you, Gabby. Appreciate it. Richard, thank you so much for joining us too. It's an honor, actually. I didn't know you were an author. This is great, and I'm not going to date myself, but I think I've been in this field for about 35 years too. So not as long as you probably, but up there. The interesting thing I'm hoping to get some insights is your viewpoint and your journey from when you started to where we're at today, because I'm sure it's probably changed quite a bit, right?
Yep.
So I think it'll be informative. So I'm just going to turn this over to you and just kind of let you begin. Talk about
Right.
yourself.
Yeah, that's a good lead in because I only have 30 years experience in cybersecurity. Came to it late in my career. I was a automotive engineer for the first 11 years out of school. And so I was designing, automotive structures, car bodies, and suspension systems, and car seats. And discovered the internet way back in 1992. And that got me immediately into networking. I started one of the first ISPs here in Michigan called
Wow.
RustNet. And then that transitioned to me joining a company called Netrex, which was also an ISP, but a security-focused ISP.
I know
And
Netflix real well, by the way.
oh, there you go. There you go. So,
I know those guys.
yeah, so I was ninth employee or something.
Yeah.
And then but I left them when they I was ostensibly a salesperson for them, and so
Okay.
for automotive. And I left them when they instituted cold call Tuesdays because I don't do cold calls. Um, so I moved on to PricewaterhouseCoopers,
Okay.
and that's where I learned, enterprise security, doing assessments and pen testing, they call it nowadays. And then from there to Gartner, and Gartner's kind of set me on this track of being an industry analyst. When I first took the job, people were saying, "Wow, it's a perfect job for you." And I don't know if that was because I was scatterbrained and all over the place. I don't know, but it definitely is my calling. And so when I left Gartner, I started to imagine what the future of a true industry analyst firm should be. And I determined it should be data driven. And so I spent 15 years trying to collect as much data on the cybersecurity industry as I could. As a matter of fact, in 2020, I published the first edition of Security Yearbook, which is a history of our industry. And I just drew on the fact that I knew the founders of most of the pioneering companies in cybersecurity. So I asked them to contribute their story, and I wrote the history around that. But I also included the directory I've been collecting of all the vendors. And I really truly think this is the future of industry analysis. To date, if you think about what Forrester and Gartner do, and they hire industry experts, And if they're not experts when they hire them, they soon become experts because they're talking to so many people every day. And their purpose is to give guidance as to which companies to buy from, and or which technology is getting out of date and they should move on to the new thing or something like that. Um, and but they really don't do the industry overall justice because they only tackle about 3% of all the vendors in the cybersecurity space, for instance, which I've looked at closely. There are 4,300 cybersecurity vendors selling 11,300 products. We include the vendors in the book every year. About 2 years ago, I finally, or 3 years ago, we launched a dashboard for basically exposing all this data to subscribers. So it's kind of a new business model for us. Typical industry analyst firm, when you talk to them or their salespeople, they want to sell you a seat for access to the research, which is PDFs, written reports, and access to the analysts, which costs, starting at about $90,000 a year for a Gartner seat. I think I'm thinking with data, we can do this a lot more efficiently. And of course, I'm the most senior industry analyst that covers cybersecurity. So there's value add in contracting with IT Harvest. So we launched in 2022. Things went great. We got our initial customers, a lot of private equity and venture capitalists were interested. But then towards the end of 2022, one of our customers for API access asked us for data on all the products. And we're scratching our head going, well, that's going to be really difficult. If you think about it, um, it, I have to personally look at every single website of a potential vendor to be added to our database. And if you've ever done that, quite often you'll realize that the vendors don't actually say what they do on their website. It's just totally confusing. They all want to have the ultimate solution and fit as many buzzwords for SEO into their landing page as they possibly can without ever saying what they actually do, because it might be a little boring, right? They want to be next gen something or other cool when all they're doing is tracking net flow and providing alerts based on net flow. So I have to go through. It takes an industry analyst in order to do that. And it took me 4,000 hours to put that data together before we launched. Um, the idea of doing that for 11,000 products was just overwhelming. Well, we happened to be looking for a solution right when ChatGPT was released in November of 2022. And all of a sudden, we had this massive tool that we could use to analyze data. And we just went to town. We started populating our database with summaries of what a company does. And then we sucked in all the product data from all the vendors. And that led us to having the only database of cybersecurity products, which answers a lot of questions. Because if you're an investor who comes to us and says, hey, we're looking at making this investment, who are the competitors with this company? That's all well and good if it's a bunch of other startups whose only, whose company category would make them directly competitive. But the biggest competitors are going to be the giants, the Palo Alto Networks or Cisco's, and that won't be in that category because it's minor business for them. So the products tell you the competitors because they use the same words to describe what their products do. So, anyways, long and the short of it is, all of a sudden we discovered that AI plus data gives you superpowers if you can only get access to it. And we're hoping to demonstrate that we've reinvented the entire industry analyst business, and this was the wave of the future. And I'm sure every analyst firm is already investigating how they can leverage AI, but it's not as easy as you may think. It's very complicated and extremely expensive. So it's kind of easy being in a niche with only 4,000 companies, but there are 250,000 IT vendors in the world. And it gets very, very expensive very quickly. So that was probably much more information that you wanted in the introductory question.
No, that's great. No, so one of the things we struggle is that we actually hired an AI expert, actually. She came from the IBM consulting world, right? And
Nice.
yesterday she spoke a couple of times and she said the exact mirrored what you just said. I
Yeah.
think where it begins was a lot of people want to use AI, and I think using it at your level, at the analytical level, is perfect because hopefully you'll be able to shorten down the data, right? Because it's all about the data, right? How do you
Right.
analyze that data? Can you make effective more decisions? And I like what you said. The big guys, Palo Altos, you know what I mean, Cisco's, they got deep pockets, right? They can afford just about. How do you get to the SMB world, especially in, you know what I mean, some of the guys that are doing the implementation, maybe some of the smaller vendors? How can we equip them to play in a level field, right? And I think that's where you're kind of would add value to that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
help those out. Yeah.
Yeah, and my luckily there's so many entry points into the world of leveraging AI, right? You can have a $20 a month
Right.
account with ChatGPT. You can have a $200 a month account if you need it. You can have API access, which is charges you by tokens. So we spend, I don't know, probably 600 or 700 a month on AI tokens from Anthropic, OpenAI, Perplexity, getting ready to move to Google Gemini. So there's lots and lots of choices, and there are lots and lots of free choices. Now, you do need a AI specialist, but it's so early that you can just assign it to somebody who's attracted to it and is going to spend the hundreds of hours it takes to get up to speed. You can download models off of Hugging Face and run them locally. That won't cost you a penny. And you can even delve into training them on your own data. So it keeps it private, unlike if you're working with one of the big foundational models, might not necessarily be private.
Yep. Yep, got it. So when you're looking at all of the data, right? You've got this, journey and book of, whatever, how many, the second version. What what do you see that's going to help enhance those security measures? I mean, in your opinion, how do you think that's going to shape this industry now going forward?
Yeah, one of the complaints I hear so often on LinkedIn is that there are too many vendors. This industry needs to consolidate, and I keep looking at it. And I've never seen a vendor that wasn't providing wasn't filling a niche, right? So it's evenly distributed. And yes, there's competitive vendors. You're going to have SentinelOne or CrowdStrike, right? But each of them have their strengths. So they each are doing quite well, and they have to keep those customers happy. And that's just across the board. But there are other things that make it seem uh, like there's too many vendors. One is thanks to the geopolitical situation caused completely by the United States, right? Or the United States is the one who started pointing the finger at China as if technology from China was somehow bad, right? Because the Chinese could, you know, I don't know, use it to spy on people. Well, there's not a single case of that happening in the security world. It does happen with bar scanners quite often, evidently. So, yes, be suspicious, but you should be equally suspicious of every provider of anything, right? They're wherever it comes from. The only case of security products being used to spy on companies is the NSA finding exploits for U.S. security products and doing just that, including they've done it for Huawei products too. So, anyways, I call this uh, digital mercantilism, and that each country wants to defend its intellectual property and its position in the world, and national security means they shouldn't rely on another potential adversary for their technology. So that led to, since Edward Snowden, so 2008 timeframe, that led to countries encouraging investments and development of separate companies in each country, in each geopolitical region. So the EU is attempting to, right now, they don't like being beholden to Amazon for cloud services. So they're building their own, which is
Mhm.
without the profit motive to build it. It's still backed by the EU itself. That's going to continue, right? It's, the world is definitely not coming together right now. So as it breaks apart, there will be even more security products. And I just, one last thought. If you're worried about privacy and, say you're a German citizen and you think that the NSA is spying on you when you, whatever, communicate with anybody in the United States, would you be more concerned about that, or if your own police force was, because you're using a German product, was intercepting your communication and spying on you? Or turn around here in the US, do we care that China could be intercepting our communications through TikTok? Or do we do we care that the NSA could be doing that as well through whatever, Facebook? And you think about, China doesn't have any jurisdiction in the United States, so if you're doing something inappropriate, they're not going to arrest you. Whereas here in the US, they could come knocking on your door because you're whatever. I won't get political, but um, so that, just keep that in mind. It's kind of opposite of what you think when it comes to privacy. So
I think also if you have to add something to that is the data privacy laws now. That's just a separate thing
big
now.
driver,
It's
yeah,
data privacy. Yeah.
yep,
I've seen a lot of companies, even on the state level now, they're starting to pass legislation in terms of where your data goes, because that's
yep,
even more sensitive, right? You talked about TikTok and applications, but where's that data live? Where's it sitting? Who's guarding it? Especially if it's a HIPAA environment like your personal what I mean, healthcare data. Like
yep,
I have
yeah,
no
yeah,
idea, right?
yeah,
And so I think that's a bigger question. What's that going to do now at this point? Because everybody's starting to align themselves. We work with a couple of different companies, and wherever I see cybersecurity, I see data privacy now, right?
yeah,
Because
absolutely.
of concern.
Absolutely.
So
And every so every new regulation that requires some sort of compliance to it generates more companies. So right now, I break
right,
down the entire industry into 18 categories. And the big ones have always been endpoint and network, identity, application security, and data security. But the biggest one is GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. There's 606 vendors in that space.
wow, I didn't know it was that crowded.
Yeah. And it's because every time there's a new regulation in any
Right,
part of the world, some company specializes in it.
right, right. So that's interesting. Just curious, we talked about you were an analyst very earlier on. you know, are you finding, what's the best way to maybe even use an AI tool to help people, right? Because you've got mountains of data this time, right?
Yep.
So maybe you could explain, because we're all, I'll call it data hoarders, right? We're data
Yeah.
lakes, right? Data
Yep.
lakes, right?
Yep.
And I work with a lot of vendors like Splunk and all those guys, and they make gigantic amounts of data, right? So I'm sitting here, I'm an analyst, I want to get involved. And especially for the younger guys, what advice can you give, um, in getting involved in that area?
Yeah. The advice I would give is drop everything and learn everything you can about using AI to accomplish your job.
Yeah.
This is the biggest thing to happen in our lives, mine included. The so to start with, play around with the fact that, with a $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT, you can upload some pretty big data sets. I don't know, hundreds of pages of data, and ask it to extract things from it, ask it to find things from it. Um, One thing that you don't first think about though is, for instance, I don't know Perl, and yet I had a whole bunch of text files that had a whole bunch of email addresses in them, and I wanted to extract first name, last name, email address, company, etc. So I just asked ChatGPT to help me write a bash script on my Mac to extract that. And it did. It worked first time. It was
Wow.
beautiful. So in that, which, writing scripts is very, very important for a security analyst, as important to a security industry analyst like me, but a security analyst who's working with data, doing threat hunting or something. Um, Script writing is super important, but a lot of that you won't have to do because the AI will just do it for you because it just looks at the data and kind of knows what's there. Um, you can test that today, and I do this probably 2 or 3 times a week, right? You get a very convincing phishing email, and you can open up the full headers and see in verbose mode in your email client, and you can see all the gobbledygook that comes with the handshake and all the rest. And you can pour over that and figure out some things look suspicious and all that, or you just cut and paste that, pass it off to ChatGPT, and ask it to analyze it, and immediately comes back and says, "This is a phishing email. The DKIM
Oh,
doesn't line up. The SPF setting isn't correct. The sender is different from the actual mail host that sent it." Just gives you a complete analysis, and you do that a few times, and you get a feeling for, wow, hey, if the AI can tell that, how come my email provider isn't doing this automatically, right? It should be
right.
automatically applied. Um, so now take that and think of a typical SOC analyst's job, which is to, they see an alert that's filtered through all these, security analytics from the SIM, etc. And there's an alert, something triggered on one of the many platforms you use, on the endpoint, on the network, on the firewall, etc. So then you have to investigate the alert and figure out, one, if it's real. This is the triage part. And two, if it's real, is it consequential? Do we have to do anything about it? Does it indicate that somebody's in the network now trying to steal information? Imagine just passing all that over to AIs and letting them do that constantly. Because typically, you go into a SOC of a medium-sized company, they'll have 100,000 alerts every day that they have to deal with. And, if you prioritize them, 20 people could handle 40 alerts during a work shift. So you basically end up ignoring most of the alerts all the time. That's what happened to Target when they were, they were attacked through a remote access given to the company that maintained their refrigeration units for the food aisles. And somebody got in through that and then got to the payment terminals and started stealing credit cards from them. Later on, when they did the incident response, they discovered that, yes, they had a product that had FireEye that had alerted them that of this access coming from this strange strange IP address. So it was just one of the thousands of alerts that got ignored. In the near future, like, now in the next few months, we will be deploying AI agents to do that work for us. There are already 15 companies, startups that do that. I predicted in my column this week that by the end of the year, these things will really work, and companies will be spending a lot of money on them. And the startups that are doing it are going to make a lot of money. And by the end of next year, there'll be a company that's on the way to $1 billion in revenue, just selling AI agents to do SOC work.
Well, do you think that's going to take jobs away then?
Totally. All done. All done. Forget getting a job
Okay.
as a tier one analyst. It's
Okay,
not work.
so it will definitely do that. So, but so the take is that maybe some retraining, those kinds of things, get accumulated with AI ML, right? For a lot of the folks, and see how you can, it's almost, we talked about this yesterday. It's called branding yourself, right? How do you brand yourself, right? Like when I graduated from computer science, I was back in 1988 at Michigan State, right? Completely different world these days, right?
I'll say.
So, as a young guy coming in, you know what I mean? I would sort of want to understand how I would, what value can I bring? Because the other issue I see a lot is that they don't have the experience that you or I would because they just haven't been around long enough, right? So I think what you're saying is immerse yourself into this type of a technology and place yourself higher up the food chain, right? So
Yep.
that way you'll be able to be
Totally.
more marketable. I tend to agree with you, by the way, on
Totally.
that 100%.
Yeah, and get to the point where you are just one with the AI. So
Yeah,
basically you're constantly communicating with it and informing yourself and learning from it. It's like you've got this tutor that knows everything there is to know and can explain it in multiple ways. So, and over time it learns, what level of understanding you're at and automatically explains it at your level. But if it's too much, like I told you, I was writing bash scripts, shell scripts, and it gave me all these explicit instructions. I said, I'm not, I can't remember how to use a Vim editor, so tone it down for me. How do I actually open a file in Vim and close it? And so it just dumbed it down for me. And it's just
well,
you can get to, you can, given a task, you can get to accomplish it. The way you learn, in school is they want to give you all the basics, right? So foundational, so you can figure it out for yourself, right? But when you're working, you just have to get the answer, and after you got the answer, you're done. You don't care how you got the answer, um,
right,
and the the large language models are just perfect for that, right? Now, you have to think critically, and you have to be able to question the answers it gives you because sometimes it makes stuff up, and you just have to be aware of that and get better
right.
at prompting it.
Well, that's the other thing too. Some of the, I use AI too, but some of the responses are not, you know what I'm saying? They're
Yeah, yeah,
not correct responses, right? So it takes some practice, I think, right?
yeah, yep,
And asking the right questions, right? And digging deep down. So I think that's an exercise in itself,
yep,
right?
yep. Well,
Um,
it's kind of funny because if you think about it, people in our generation remember telling our parents how to use their first computer, right? And
right,
they would be afraid to do anything because it's so complicated, right? That you have to say, just go ahead and move the mouse, click anywhere. It doesn't matter. You can't break it. All that. And and now most of us are experiencing the same thing. It's like, ooh, what should I tell it? What should I ask it? Right? Whereas, my kids just interact with it and start asking
right,
questions and chatting. And my daughter sends me conversations she's had with, it's like her version of Chat GPT because it just learned how she likes to talk. And sounds like it's got a personality. Whereas when I use Chat GPT, it's pretty dry.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that's great. So one of the things that you said was sort of interesting was that on the AI part of the system response, and there's a recovery. So when you actually put all this data set together, you were going out to the web, pulling all these things together. Was that with AI too? Did you use any tools to be able to extract that? Or did that help you in your process? I guess
Yeah, 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 absolutely. So the initial stuff was all manual. I had a team in India that was doing the scraping of LinkedIn for me, finding new
Okay.
companies. And uh, when I wrote the first edition of Security Yearbook, all the data was just in a big Google sheet that I shared with the team in India,
Mm,
and they would systematically go through it once a month to update everything. So we started automating all that process, and we use multiple scrapers. There's an art to screen scraping. A lot of effort goes into it, so it's best to use a third party to do it because a lot of you know organizations don't want screen scrapers taking data from their website, right? And
no.
LinkedIn especially, right? There's been some big lawsuits about people doing that, and LinkedIn lost. So apparently it's okay to screen scrape LinkedIn. So, but then you go to collecting, harvesting data from each of the 4,000 plus vendors. And if you and keep in mind, we're the only ones who have that list. So we're the only ones who can do this. Anybody else that wanted to, catch up with us would have to come up with a list of vendors first, and then they could quickly catch up, right? All they need is AI at this point, because they still need, a me to do the categorization, to tell whether a company is endpoint, network, application security, whatever. But that's only for now. Because you got to keep in mind, AIs are increasing in intelligence by a factor of 10 every 12 months. And, I test it constantly and still can't categorize companies, but it's getting better. And 12 months from now, piece of cake. It'll do it perfectly. So,
Yeah, I think it's an evolution, not a revolution. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that's
oh,
one of
it'll
the
look like a
things.
revolution historically. We'll look back, if it's, from
Right,
2022 to 2027, we got super intelligence. That's 5 years. That's nothing. Edison invented the light bulb, and it was probably 5 years later before the streets of New York were lit.
right, right. It's one of the interesting things is that we just hired an AI specialist, right? And
Yep.
we had a conversation the other day. We were doing some brainstorming within the company, and she brought up a good point. She said, there's a lot of tools with AI, but there's no consulting on how to really use the
Yeah.
AI and how do you train your people in AI, those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
So
Big
that seems to,
opportunity.
that seems
Yeah.
to be where the industry is going. So one of the things you said earlier, how, I'm coming into the industry, as a level one analyst or whatever, right? How do I prepare myself for skill sets with that? And how does it interface with a human analyst, right? Because I think you still need both, right? I think you've got to double check your work, and then, like for an example, I was at a customer's account the other day, and we want to get into AI, and I'll tell you, this is one man's opinion. It also depends on what vertical market that you're in, right?
Mhm.
Some are much more advanced, right?
Yep.
So you talked about automotive manufacturing; they're still way behind, right? But then you look at banking, finance,
You'd
they're
be
like,
surprised. You'd be
yeah, well,
surprised.
that's
GM has 300 models inside their
wow.
organization.
I did
Yeah.
not know
Yeah.
that.
Now maybe
So,
it's,
right,
GM's big company, and I don't know if they're
right,
applying it to manufacturing. It could just be internal IT operations or finance operations that
sure.
are doing that. But yeah, it shocked me when I learned that. Um, there are 2 million models on Hugging Face. So, all these different models that people have been training, and you just hunt and peck and usually download them for free. So that's, it's funny you're asking questions that should be addressed to an AI. If you want to know, hey, what's the best way to prepare for a job when I graduate with my computer science degree? And you know, where is AI going to be at the time? That kind of thing. It'll give you all sorts of suggestions, and it's we're at a explosive time in technology development, and so you probably should be spending a lot of time on YouTube watching the founders of Anthropic talk and the founders of OpenAI talk, and it's mind blowing. These are some of the smartest people that you'll ever see, and sometimes they're socially awkward. Um, so we have that advantage over them, but other than that, they are visionaries, and really really helpful to
Yeah.
watch what they're talking about.
And I think with the other piece, I'm starting to really figure out this is something by just having conversations. A lot of these AI models were built with, when I say this, I mean this in a small sort of way that maybe it was 100 people, because that
Oh yeah.
way they were the guys that started all this stuff, right? So you're getting a subset of what really could be a bigger model. So I think, how do
Right.
we add to that? You know what I mean? How do we take that with the models that we currently have and multiply that out so it gets much more intelligent, those kinds of things? Because again, and there was a lady we had on our talk here, and they called it gender bias, right?
Yep.
So what does that
Yep.
mean? If
Yeah.
you got
Yeah.
100 people in that division that created that learning process and that engine, let's just say 90% were men, 10% were women.
Yep.
Probably are going to get a little bit different data set reaction, right? Than somebody that was a 50-50, or somebody from Asia, right, culturally speaking, and then somebody from the United States. So that's always going to be interesting to see how that sort of,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know,
For sure.
evolves. Like,
Yep.
yeah, something like that.
Um, Back to, you're talking about people learning, and it makes me think of students, and I feel a little sorry for them because from my experience so far, academia is shunning the whole concept of using AI. So there, you would think at this point, your alma mater, Michigan State, would have courses in AI, just as I thought, my school should have courses in cybersecurity, and they still don't to this day. That's the little university down in Ann Arbor. They don't teach cybersecurity. They outsource that to somebody, a certificate program provider. Um, and I don't think, maybe they teach machine learning to people who want to, learn about building models. I doubt it at Michigan State, right? That's super high level topography, crazy math stuff. Um, but I know the students aren't being given help, even though Microsoft gives them access to their AI, and Google's giving them free access to AI. These students should be going crazy just with learning and branching out on their own. Not cheating on the exams and not having it write their papers, etc. But um, I wouldn't blame them if they wrote the outlines for their papers.
Right.
That makes
Well,
so
it's
much
interesting
sense.
because now they have AI checkers in the
Yep.
education system, right? So, one hand you want to use AI because I was like you, I used to use an encyclopedia. Probably half the people don't know what those are, right? And go to the library, read,
Yeah.
write all
Yeah.
that stuff out, right? And because there was no internet back in, you know what I mean, the
Yep.
92, 3, 4, right? So I think it's really comes down to how can they use it and what can the schools do to adopt that and foster growth in there, yet make sure the students are learning. And that's like a fine line, right?
Right. Right.
Because, I've got a 15-year-old and he says, Dad, I use Chat GPT all the time.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
said, okay, what does the school say? He goes, oh, they got GPT checkers now. I
Nice.
was like, okay. So he goes, I said, have any of you guys got caught? And the teacher said something. She goes, well, they know we use it, but it's like getting it more accepted, you know what I mean, so to
Good.
speak.
Good.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah. You probably don't remember when calculators weren't allowed in school.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
remember. I
All right.
was part of
Okay.
it.
All right. I mean, I, I'm not saying we had to use slide rules when I went to engineering school, but yeah, there were still courses taught on how to use them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is now that, people, and I agree with you. I'm not sure why the higher institutions are not adopting AI and teaching AI. But getting back to your other thing is a lot of people will do the certifications in cybersecurity, but they don't really go through the analyticals of why you're doing that, right? Because anybody can do a cert,
Right.
right? Because here's an anomaly. By the way, I used to work for FireEye. I worked for FireEye for 4 years, so
Okay.
I did next generation firewalls, right? That was my thing. So a lot of the stuff back then, around the 2010, 11, was all new stuff. Today, it's all whitelisted and everything. But it goes down to coming back to, you know, where do we see this industry sort of evolving, and how can we get the higher institutions to start training the people to start using these tools, right? And to your point, they teach the higher level like things that like U of M has a program. I know Michigan State, but they really never get into like specifics. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's almost like when the kids graduate, they fail
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they have no
Yep.
experience, and that blows
Yep.
my mind away completely,
Yeah.
right?
I had that
So
problem at Michigan. I got lucky because there was one professor who taught an actual tool called MSc Nastran for doing structural analysis. That was the hot thing in engineering at the time, numerical methods. Once you modeled something physically, you could test it virtually and find out what the stresses would be and stuff like that. I took every course offered on the subject. And when I graduated, I answered a 2-line ad in the Ann Arbor News looking for aerospace engineer with MSc Nastran experience. Boom, I had a job. I interviewed the next week and got the job that day. And years later, when I had a consulting company with like 25 employees, I went back to to Michigan to address the entire staff of the engineering department. And I get up there, and I'm a 25-year-old and successful entrepreneur, and I tell them about how the university should teach more tools. And they eviscerated me. People were standing up and pointing their finger and shouting, and they'd say, "We're a research institute. If you want to learn tools, you can go to a Votech." And which I'm going, fine, but why did the powers that be destroy Votechs across the country? Right? They don't exist because there's some perception that Votech was creating a division between haves and have-nots. Right? The haves get to go to college. The have-nots have to go to Votech. And so everybody goes to college and gets degrees in physical therapy instead of, how to, I don't know, repair automobiles, and welding. Like I took every welding class in Votech in Wisconsin, where I grew up, while I was going to college, so that I could work in a shipyard as a summer job. And that's just, anyways, we lost that. I think maybe AI is what's going to push universities back to teaching tools. Come on. How could you be a graduate? Say you entered school in the fall of 2022. So you graduate in the spring of 2027, maybe. And what if you didn't have a single course in applied AI in that time frame? There'll be people who had 4 years head start on you, who didn't go to college. They'd already built a business or side product, or I don't know. This is the biggest opportunity ever. Everybody should be jumping on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. No, I think that's well spoken. The other thing that would be interesting to see is, how businesses are going to really start using this. How are they going to approach this now, right? How are they going to take the tools for AI and the skill sets and internally put those so they can accelerate, they can become more efficient? Because that's the other thing too, because everybody, from where I can see, is being stressed to do more with less.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
and
your
the same,
opinion.
I do see from the security side, I see a lot of trepidation, right? It's, oh my God,
Yeah,
people are gonna like do things they shouldn't do, which has always been the problem with, IT and security, in that people experiment. We're experimenting animals, and you give us access, and we're going to start seeing what we can do with it. And the first thing we're going to ask is, what's the average salary of somebody in my role at this company, right?
right.
And I don't know. I think you have to, on the one hand, become a little more comfortable with transparency. Because if all of your employees became adept at applying AIs, and you give them tools, etc., and you can build guardrails around them so they can't ask financial questions,
Right.
and then they'll be more productive, because that's what you want, right? Is for them to 10x their productivity rather than have them be replaced by an AI.
Sure.
Wouldn't it be great if, there'll be people that go, wow, look at what I can do with this AI. Can we please buy me an agent that does all this work? And now I'll have a 24/7 employee working for me that only costs as much as a regular employee. That'd be fantastic. And then, everybody get one or two of those working under them. And that's how you expand your workforce.
Yeah, the other day somebody was trying to get me to buy a virtual assistant. I don't know if you've seen those. They're getting popular now. The note takers are really popular, but this is actually a virtual assistant.
Cool.
And when, you sign up for this thing, you give it access to your schedule, you give it access to all your life, and it actually organizes your life for you too.
Yeah.
It tells you your conflicts. Yeah, it's sort of interesting. I'm just doing a trial on it for 30 days because I know my.
Let me know how it goes, because I need a
Yeah, I
virtual
will.
assistant.
It started and it's good. Gabby's smiling because she does a lot of our, scheduling for things and, and analyst. But it actually is a great tool. I got to be honest with you.
Cool.
I was like, oh, I will use this thing. And it's been doing some things, especially when I have conflicts with scheduling and those kinds of things,
Yeah,
and
least
predictive
favorite
things.
thing to
And
deal with. Yeah.
yeah, so you got 4 different calendars, you've got 3 or 4 different areas that you're focusing on, right? And that's where I see some of that value. It declutters some of us,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
You'll
and
know
that's
it's intelligent when it starts building in, breaks in your calendar,
right.
for whatever, so you don't have to explicitly say, do not put 4 meetings in a row, that kind of thing.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Oh man,
Well,
that's
that's
great.
great.
Yeah, we're doing that
I
with
want to.
we're
Go
just
ahead.
doing we're doing something similar with sales agent. So it's going to reach out to my warm leads. I got about 1,000 people I've talked with over the last 3 years. Just reach
Sure.
out, say, how's it going? I'm Richard Stiennon's assistant, and just checking in to see if you'd like to re-engage.
Yeah.
And then when somebody says, well, I don't know, remind me what you do, it'll respond. And there'll be
Wow.
a back and forth exchange until the goal being to get an appointment on my calendar. And
Right.
I'm like, yeah, let's try this.
Yeah. You'll have to tell me how that works out. That's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting. Uh, what do you call it? Connection. Matter of fact, we have a guy that's coming on next week, or was it May 7th, at our Chime business. I'll give you the address, and he's actually talking about AI in sales, how to scale
Yep.
up using AI in sales.
Right.
So
Oh
it's a
yeah.
basic fundamentals
Yeah. Yeah.
of you. Now you don't have to do all those things. The cold calling, it actually will produce a list for you of targets too. Like,
Yep.
hey, based on this data set, which is great because in the old days when we used to do, you were laughing and saying cold call Tuesdays, but you would just basically start calling randomly, right?
Yeah. Yep.
This will actually generate things by using your LinkedIn's, your screen scrapers, and produce a actual more of a defined list for you.
Yep. Yep.
So
I've gotten phone calls from AI bots. They're really good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're
So
yeah. You just have
that's
to give them space because it's easy to talk over
right.
them, and that confuses them. But
Right.
yeah.
I want to open it up for anybody that wants to ask questions or anything like that at this point. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I really appreciate the insight. I think it's interesting to see where this industry maybe come back in a year or so. We'll all be sitting in a different spot and learning things. So
Yeah.
Gabby, you want to take from here?
Yeah, if there are any questions from the audience. I was also like thinking like, what's one thing that surprises you the most about how the research landscape has changed? And the one that I'm more curious about is what might surprise you in the next 5 years?
Okay. So, well, let's look at the industry research side because we have been mixing industry research and cybersecurity research a
Right.
little bit. But industry research, where we're talking about Gartner, what really surprised me is Gartner's dominance in the space. I always thought it would be Gartner, Forrester, IDC, but Gartner is, I don't know, 5 times, no, 20 times bigger than Forrester in terms of revenue. So they definitely dominate the industry and haven't been challenged. Many people try and challenge them, and they all try and come up with a replacement for the Magic Quadrant, and none of them really get off the ground. So, but I think that even if a competing firm doesn't come at them with AI, I know how to do that, right? But I would need about $20 million to build it, and I could create what I have for cybersecurity. I could create for the entire tech industry. Even if somebody decided to do that, Gartner's still going to lose business to AIs because we built a simple tool which you can try for free at harvestiq.ai, and it's basically a chat model based on our data. So you can ask any questions. So you can say, "Give me a SWOT analysis for Sierra," and it thinks for about 2 minutes, then it writes out entire the strength, weakness, opportunity, threat analysis or create a battle card because I'm selling against these guys, and I'm Fortinet, and I'm selling against Palo Alto. Write me a battle card, their weaknesses that I can attack as a salesperson. Or I'm looking for an investment. You can ask all these questions of it, and that is a lot faster than scheduling a call with an analyst. And it's custom research, and it knows a lot more than any analyst on the planet will ever know because it's got access to all this data.
Right.
Interesting.
I left that on the chat so everyone can just go and take a look. I think that's the one, right?
Yep, that's it. Yep, great.
All right.
And it's free to sign up, and then you get 10 free questions a month, and which is expensive because they cost 70 cents for us to answer the questions. So you're getting $7 of value for signing up every month.
Okay. All right. All right. So if we don't have any other questions from the audience, then I think we can start wrapping up. I don't know if Ajay, do you have closing comments, or we go straight to Richard? Okay, yeah, we do have one. How can we go forward with AI in an easy way? Keep our jobs. Next AI will be king.
Yeah. Welcome our alien overlords. So figure out how to work with AI instead of worrying about finding a job that's safe from AI. Now, mind you, jobs that require human interactions are pretty safe for a long time, right? So I don't know what those are, entertainers, whatever. There are a lot of jobs like that. Government jobs, totally safe. Totally safe. It'll be decades before the government replaces people with AI. But also think of how you can, become an entrepreneur with AI's help. It's unbelievable that you can have such a good advisor at your elbow telling you what to do next.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it might say, well, you should create a game that's like Tetris, only it's something else. And you go, okay, great. Write a marketing plan. Writes a marketing plan. Okay, uh, build it, and it builds it for you. It's just amazing.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Kiran, for your question. All right. Any other questions before we wrap this session up? If not, yes. So, Richard, it's been a pleasure. I loved hearing about everything and all your experience. Again, Richard is an author. Do you want to leave your, I don't know, a link to your website or anything on the chat so we can take a look?
Sure. Yeah, you go to the website, which is just itharvest.com.
Okay.
And you go.
So is IT Harvest your company, Richard? Is that?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
I got it. Okay. I understand what it was. Okay.
And you go to you check out our dashboard if you're doing cybersecurity industry research at dashboard.itharvest.com.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, it's been great, Richard. Any closing comments?
Be prepared for change. I hope the listeners feel that they thrive on change because change is coming in so many different ways.
Definitely. All right. Thank you so much for this session. And also, hopefully we'll see you locally in this Chion business so you can, promote your book. I'll share your number with Ajay. Ajay, you'll take it from here to invite him to our in-person events in Michigan. Cool. Thanks again, Richard. Thank you, Ajay. We'll see you all next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks, Ajay.
Guys, thank you.